Yo, hey, it's Milky Way here. I'm fucking retarded and hit photo instead of video. Let's go. We got another deck profile with. And Glenn's here too.
Hello, motherfuckers.
So what do we have?
So right here we have the new Nordics. This is essentially what you get out of the box. I've added in 2 cards, but what you see here is what you get out of the box essentially. So this
it's starter deck variant. I'll say that because knowing me, I'll forget to put it in the title.
Yeah, so we're probably going to do another deck profile of this after I've refined my strategy for this deck, figured out how exactly it's supposed to play. But for now, this is what it's at.
So you can tell his lack of knowledge when it comes to this deck by the duel video that's gonna be going up.
I made one mistake. All right, so let's.
And I made 10. Point.
All right, let's begin with the monsters.
Actually, no. The mistake I made. Yeah, keep going.
So let's begin with the monsters. The first monster we run 3 copies of Diverg of the Nordic Alfar. So this guy is not your engage, or is your engage, because now with Gulveg, anything's your engage. You can make any monster you run in this deck into this thing. That's why you run 3 of these, because they also have a nice effect that pulls a Nordic relic from your graveyard to your hand.
It's a thing.
It's also the only level 1 you run in the deck. Next we have 1 copy of Mara of the Nordic Alfar. The reason you only run 1 copy of this is because it's a very situational card. Mara of the Nordic Alfar works like any other tuner, except you have to use the other 2 synchro materials from your hand.
No, you saying that situational, could you potentially run this as a side deck and instead run like an upstart or something?
You could. I prefer to run it in main deck though, because there have been opportunities in the past where I have summoned Beelzeus off of it,
Okay.
Which makes it really decent.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
Next, we have got 2 copies of Valkyrie of the Nordic Ascendant. So, the basic effect of this card is when this card is normal summoned and your opponent controls a monster and you don't control any, you banish 2 Nordic monsters from your hand. It summons 2 tokens that are level 4, so it's an instant level 10. Most of the time, again, you make this thing into Gulvig, which we'll go into later. But she's also a really strong one. She's very good at getting it out of level 10 in and of herself if you can't make another Gulvig.
Neat.
Yeah, if I didn't have Paul there, I would have died.
Next, I choose to run 3 copies of Mimir of the Nordic Ascendant. So this guy has a pretty neat effect. So once per turn, at the start of your standby phase, if this guy's in your graveyard, you can just discard, if you control a Nordic monster and this card's in your graveyard, you can just discard a spell or trap and just add this guy back to your hand. He's really good at just being fodder for synchros, fodder for battle,
Being a thing that exists.
yeah.
Are these Ultra Pro or are these EMC or what?
Next, we have 3 Transgrosnir of the Nordic Beast. So this is your hand trap of the deck. So when a monster you control is destroyed by battle or sent to the graveyard, you basically just special summon this thing. When this thing is changed from defense to attack, or face-up defense to attack, I believe it special summons 1 Nordic monster from your deck in defense position, except this one.
So he's a special little snowflake.
Yeah, so he not only specials himself, he also specials another.
Yeah, special black little snowflake.
And we've got Langus freaking the fuck out over something.
Next, you have his brother, Transgrosnir of the Nordic Beasts. So these guys, basically, if they're killed by battle, they summon 2 tokens.
It's a fluffy sheep.
They're a stall.
So you probably summon that guy and then summon one of those.
Yeah, you summon that, you summon one of these, and then usually you're supposed to use one of the Nordic Beast tuners to summon Thor, but I found that Thor is usually the worst one to summon. Next, you're on 1 Venatus of the Nordic Ascendant. I'm actually thinking about changing this, maybe swapping out 1 more Mimir for another Venatus. But basically, she can be treated as any Nordic tuner. So this is what you would use in this deck to get Thor.
You take 400 points.
So Venatus is really good. And in addition, she's also a free Foolish Burial from your deck, because you don't run anything but Nordic monsters. Next, 3 Lejosolfs of the Nordic Alfar. So this guy is a pretty good combo piece. If you normal summon him, you can target 1 Nordic monster you control, and special summon 1 with a lower level from your hand. That being said, he's also really useful just to fuse with Valkyrie, because Level 4, level 4, level 2.
Caffeine crush.
Finally, we have Svartov. So you never want to draw this guy. This guy should never be in your hand. You always want to get him off the effect of Gulveg, which again we'll go into later. Basically, he is your... If you can't make Odin for some reason, this guy lets you make Loki. So
It's like a garnet.
So that wraps us up
It's
for...
like garnet. You don't want it in your hand, but it's useful.
So that wraps it up for monsters. Next, let's go into our spells and traps. So first, we have a Monster Reborn, because what deck don't you run this in right now?
Fine.
Dark Hole, because again, what deck don't you run that in?
One where you run Rakeki instead.
You can run both. One copy of Forbidden Chalice. So basically, target one face-up monster on the field. It gains 400 attack, but its effects are negated. Pretty good. Mostly because I didn't want to run Effect Veilers. Also because this can be used as fodder for Mimir's effect. So these here are the cards that I added in. 2 copies of Burial from a different dimension. These guys... since Gulveg's effect does banish, these guys let you return any tuners that you might have banished to the graveyard to use for Odin, Loki, or Thor's effects. 3 copies of Hey Trunade. This is a really nice card. Return all set spells and traps on the field to the hand. Hey Trunade honestly has got to be one of the best cards that I think they release in this set, because it does the job of Giant Trunade very well. It's a slight nerf that honestly doesn't feel too bad.
I will debate that heavily, but okay.
Next, we have 3 copies of the Nordic Lights. I put this in here for, honestly, a lack of anything else. The Nordic Lights is the field spell. Nordic monsters cannot be destroyed by battle, but if it gets killed, destroy all Nordic monsters on the field. So if your opponent is also playing Nordics, you can kill this by yourself to destroy their board.
Yay!
But it's pretty...
Non-existent mirror matches.
It's pretty much only good for the mirror match. And finally, 3 copies of March Towards Ragnarok. This is basically a Forbidden Chalice, but just for Acer monsters, which is the boss archetype of the Nordics. Going into traps here, we only run 6 traps. We run 3 Gleipnir, the Fetters of Fenrir. Add 1 Nordic monster from your deck to your hand. It's very obvious why we play this thing.
It's a search.
And finally,
It's a Rhoda.
Nordic Relic Leviton. This is probably my favorite trap in the deck, because it says target one face-up monster on the field that destroyed a monster by battle this turn. Destroy it. Cards and effects cannot be activated in response to this card's activation.
Sounds like a shooty or Cyberretsu armor.
It both is and isn't, because your opponent can't respond to it.
It isn't because they can't respond to it, but it is because it
Because-
has to kill. It's limited on what it can kill.
Yes.
The actual activation limits are what makes it kind of shitty.
So that finishes us up for main deck. So as of right now, I don't have a side deck because there was no reason to make a side deck for this deck. The cards that come in the actual box just aren't good enough.
Well,
So-
the side deck is really subjective of where you play, what
Yeah.
you're playing against, and whatever.
So let's go into Best Girl. We have here Gulvig of the Nordic Ascendant. So this is a long paragraph of text, but let's go into it very simply. So very simply, if this card is Link summoned, you can banish up to 3 cards from your hand and or field. And if you do, special summon that many Nordic monsters from your deck in defense position. Also, for the rest of this turn, you cannot special summon monsters except Acer monsters, nor normal summon or set any monsters. You can only use this effect of Gulvig of the Nordic Ascendant once per turn. While this card points to an Acer monster, your opponent cannot target that monster with card effects. Also, monsters your opponent controls cannot target this card for attacks. So as you'll see in the duel video, I misplayed very heavily because I forgot that you can actually link Gulvig into another Gulvig and use her effect again to get another Acer monster. If I had done that, I probably would have won the last game by summoning Loki and negating spells and traps. But as I didn't do that, I did lose that one. The second bit of Gulvig's effect is actually just as useful as the first. So, while this card points to an Acer monster, your opponent cannot target that monster with card effects, and also, monsters your opponent controls cannot target this card for attacks.
Also, I don't think you can actually do that because it's a level. And links don't have levels.
Level 5 or lower, you can, because you can link Trickstar Bloom into Trickstar Bloom.
There.
Right. Moving on, 1 copy of Thor, Lord of the Acer. So, the reason why I say this guy is the worst is because, yes, he does have a good amount of attack. It's just, he's the hardest to summon because the Nordic Beast tuners are just hard to use. The only Nordic Beast tuner requires that it be summoned, or that requires that it's level 5, and it requires that it be special summoned with your opponent controlling a synchro monster while you control no monsters. It's just hard to bring out. So what he does is once per turn you can negate the effects of all face-up monsters your opponent controls until the end of the turn. Once per turn during the end phase, if this face-up card is destroyed by battle into the graveyard, you can banish 1 Nordic Beast tuner from your graveyard, special summon this card, and if you do, inflict 800 damage to your opponent. Like I said, this guy is probably the worst out of the 3.
Keep in mind also this deck came out back when synchros were actually relevant.
Next, we have 3 copies of Loki, Lord of the Acer. So, while he's not your most common summon, Loki is still a very good summon. So, just summarizing his effect, when your opponent activates a spell or trap card once per turn during the battle phase, this is a quick effect, you can negate the activation and destroy it. And it also has the same effect as Thor. If it's sent to the graveyard, you can banish 1 Nordic Alfar tuner, summon it back, and if you do, you can target 1 trap in your graveyard and add it to your hand. That's the only reason why we don't really go into this guy that much, because his resurrection effect doesn't really help us that much because we don't run that many traps. Oh. Right. Okay. Next, we have Odin, Father of the Acer. So this guy is the one you want to make almost every time. So he requires a Nordic Ascendant tuner, but once per turn you can make this card be unaffected by spell and trap effects until the end phase. Combine that with Gulveg, and he's untargetable by all effects and unaffected by spell and trap effects. Not to mention...
Your turn.
Only during my turn, but it's a constant not able to be targeted.
Yeah.
Not to mention he does stand strong at a massive 4,000 attack.
But as you'll see in the Cubic video, I'm still able to get over it.
So, during the end phase, if this face-up card was destroyed by your opponent's card and sent to the graveyard, opponent's card, keep in mind, so not even by battle, you can banish 1 Nordic Ascendant tuner from your graveyard, special summon this one, and if it was summoned this way, you draw 1 card. So that's why this guy's just so much more useful. He's a consistency builder. So we've gone through all of the Acer synchros, so let's go into a bit more of the techie synchros that I've added in. So first, Old Entity Hastor. With the amount of level 2s we run in this deck, it's entirely possible that you can draw into a Mara and 2 Mimirs. So it's entirely possible that you can just summon Mara, link it with the Mimirs, get Old Entity Hastor. It's a pretty decent play. 1 copy of Coral Dragon. Coral Dragon's is a pop, essentially. And if it's sent to the graveyard, you draw a card. It's a nerfed Odin, essentially.
Except that one was actually relevant. It's called Dark Synchro.
Yep, and here we have Bleeds of the Diabolic Dragons. Speaking of Dark Synchro.
Fuck, I never ran this thing in Dark Synchro, man.
So, 1 Dark Tuner, 1 Dark Tuner plus 1 non-tuner monster cannot be destroyed by battle or by card effects. If you take damage from an attack involving this card from an opponent's or from an opponent's card effect, this card gains attack equal to the damage you took. This guy can get massive very fast.
Especially against Cubics. Oh wait, you already did that.
Yeah, I mean, I could have run him against Cubics, and it possibly would have saved me, but I didn't have a chance to make him.
I don't think it was as well.
Yeah,
I just dropped a Cubic.
yeah. No, what would have saved me if I was remembered? I could link Gulvig into Gulvig and make Loki. That would have saved me, but since I didn't.
Yeah.
And finally, Beelzeus of the Diabolic Dragons, the better one. 1 Dark Tuner plus 2 non-tuner monsters cannot be destroyed by battle or card effects. Other monsters you control cannot attack. Once per turn, you can target 1 monster your opponent controls, change that opponent's attack to 0, and your opponent takes half damage from attacks involving this card this turn. Also, gain life points equal to the change in its attack. Or gain life points equal to that monster's original attack. So this guy makes your life points very buff. He is very buff at a very strong 4,000, and he's also indestructible, basically.
Kaiju's.
Yeah. So that finishes up the deck profile for us here. So thank you all so much for watching, and I will just once again just arrange all the boss monsters here for you all to see.
I'll do a quick overview of this shit.
So once again, thank you so much for watching the deck profile, and we will see you with the next one.
Yeah! Fuck your outro. Don't forget to like, hit favorite, subscribe, share, whatever you want to do. Like I said, if you're new, subscribe. Really helps.
Yes, it will help.
Also, because I can't do this in any other video, check me out on Twitch. I'm usually streaming almost every day. And you can come see me get possibly salty at Dota or just be toxic to people.
That sucks.
Fuck you, Glenn.
You don't have to want to buy your Senjus, dude.
Alright. Hope y'all enjoyed. Peace
Two
out.
copies of it.